Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second in our trio of May virtual events for Edie and Neal's Book Club. Today's event, if we could have just 10 minutes of your time, academic library workers and LIS instructors, features presentations of approximately 10 minutes in length each by the authors of A Complete Guide to Creative Technology Spaces in Academic Libraries, Media Labs, Makerspaces, and more, Essentials of STEM Librarianship, The Legacy of Black Women in Librarianship When They Dare to Be Powerful, which is the first book in our new Critical Cultural Information series. Organize Your Library, Developing the Collective Power of Library Workers, which is the second book in our Critical Cultural Information series, and Records and Information Management, third edition. A post-show Q&A and discussion will follow the last of the five presentations. Please enjoy a look at some of our new and recent and forthcoming titles before our first presenters come aboard shortly. Please welcome Emily Thompson, Eric Johnson, and Vanessa Rodriguez, three of the co-authors of A Complete Guide to Creative Technology Spaces in Academic Libraries, Media Labs, Makerspaces, and more.
Hello, I'm just getting my slides up. There we go. Hello, everybody. It's really nice to see you all. My name's Emily Thompson, and I'm here with my colleagues Vanessa Rodriguez and Eric Johnson. And we are the authors, as was just introduced, along with our co-authors, Kelsey Schaefer and Oscar Keys, who are not here today. Um, and we were thinking about what's the most important thing about these spaces, and really it is the people. You can spend thousands of dollars on equipment, and it won't matter if no one can figure out how to use it. And so we wanted to spend 10 minutes of our time talking about why those people are so very important. Because the peoples are more important than the stuff every single time. It doesn't matter how cool your stuff is if you don't have good people there, it won't work. But if you're just trying to teach people how to use free apps like Audacity and all you have are phones, but you have good people, you'll still get really good results. So we're going to talk first of all about hiring, getting the right people, and then talking about the reference interview, and then talking a little bit about where the librarians shine, which is instructional design. So I'm going to throw it over to Eric.
Excellent. Yeah, so just a little quick background of sort of the staffing of spaces like the ones that we all run. We all operate spaces that are sort of creative technology spaces in academic libraries. Typically, I guess I'd say there are sort of four broad categories of employees, as you can see. It's important to note that different university libraries, of course, have different models about how they use these kinds of staff, and for even how sort of the categorization even works about like what's an hourly versus what's a salaried staff member, that kind of thing. But broadly speaking, the four here are pretty typical. Just a couple notes on some of them. Student employees, like here at VCU, where I work at Virginia Commonwealth University, our student employees are our first line of assistance in our space, which is a combination makerspace and kind of multimedia center. So they circulate equipment. We have a big circulation system. They orient people to the spaces and equipment that we offer, doing training sessions, that kind of thing. And they're sort of the ones that do the initial answering of questions when patrons come and they need something about the software or the hardware that they're using. The other three categories are kind of more depth and specialty positions, I guess I would call it. Often folks coming into those have specialized skills of some nature, depending on the nature of the position. Broadly, you might say that these are the ones that are really involved in the development of a service model for a creative technology space, and sort of get to, operate at that kind of level as well. Also, they're kind of the grown-ups in the room, right? If we have our student employees, then they are often the ones who, if the students have fielded a question that they can't answer without enough in-depth knowledge, that it's often the other staff members who kind of can do the in-depth assistance for folks like that. The fourth category, librarians, I want to mention, their big thing typically is also going to be plugging into the curriculum and supporting the teaching faculty. Emily's going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But often that is, comes in the form of classes, either coming into the space to learn a particular skill or learn about a particular kind of equipment, or often working with faculty on developing projects that their students can do in the space, right? But that support the class curricular work. Next slide, please, Emily. So, and then I just want a quick note on how do you find such people? And I don't mean like where do you advertise? I mean, what are the qualities that we look for in staffing spaces like ours? You might think that what matters most is sort of mad technical skills, and that's some technical skills are important, but we actually found that a lot of times mad technical skills are almost problematic. It's sort of the gifted athlete paradox, that somebody's so good at what they do that they actually can't really explain how they get there to somebody who isn't where they are in terms of skills. So what we tend to look for are people who are really good teachers. And so we do want them to have some familiarity, as I say, with the aspect of the technology we use, as you can see. But we realize that with the right folks, you can typically train them in the technologies that we're introducing people to. And by right folks, I mean folks with these kinds of skills. So, and the two big ones are curiosity. I think the highlighted ones, curiosity helps them, helps get them into a space like ours, helps them continue to grow as a staff member, as an employee, as somebody who's excited about this technology. The curiosity drives it. And then the big skill that we look for a lot is empathy, actually, and specifically the ability to remember what it's like to be a beginner with technology and then help walk that person forward. That kind of ability to put themselves in the position of somebody who's a beginner is the big one. And then, of course, once they're hired, we want them to help people. And Vanessa will talk more about how that'll work.
Yep. Hi, everyone. So we don't just fill our libraries with books and wish our patrons the best, right? We have reference librarians or whatever you might call them in your institution that help patrons with the research. So as Eric mentioned, we do ha like to have somebody who has some form of skills in this area and usually customer service. But there's kind of a gap between customer service and librarianism. So we also teach our staff the reference interview. So these are the ALA RUSA guidelines, the most current ones, I believe. I am actually working on co-writing an article about the reference interview and how it relates to these types of labs. Next slide, Emily. Sorry, thank you. So day to day, our lab employees do things like, refresh the space, reset things, tidy up, the whole thing. We have equipment. A lot of these labs have equipment that we loan out. So then we also work kind of like the circulation desk where making sure that all the pieces are in the kit and, everything is back on time and so forth. But some patrons might need help on how to use the AV materials that we're loaning out. Some might not have any experience, or some might have experience maybe in a different model of the particular microphone we have, so they need some kind of guidance on that. Patrons wanting help is kind of inevitable. The way I pitch it is kind of like, if you have a microfiche reader, someone in the library has to know how to use the microfiche reader so they can show it to others. And last one of the great things about having these kind of labs is when the equipment comes back, we get firsthand feedback from the patrons because we just ask, how does it go? And we get to know more about our patrons' needs and whether our equipment is meeting those needs. Next slide. So here's a small preview of some of the sample questions that we have here about the reference interview and how we modify that to our needs. So for example, Do you have a copy of the assignment? Let's look at it together. So if a student comes in and they need help with whatever multimedia project they might be working on, it's great to sit with them and look at the assignment and talk it out. And it's kind of the same as if a student comes in with a certain research topic that, that they need help researching and finding articles on. Do you have blank equipment or will you need blank equipment? So this is kind of like how students asking students what research they've already done when they come in. In this case, if they're looking for cameras, maybe they just need additional microphones. Maybe the camera that they have is not the right camera for the job, but it's kind of the same deal of gauging where they're at in their research process, where they're at in their project creation process. And another example is probably one of the most crucial in the difference between customer service and librarianship. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources you would need, which inevitably happens sometimes. But here is some more information. So, a librarian would never send a student away empty-handed, like, oh, sorry, we don't have it, that's it. We try to find something, oh, ask so-and-so librarian, let's book a consultation with them, or we don't have that book, let's go to interlibrary loan. We do the same thing. If we don't have something, we might be able to refer them to a different lab on campus. We've sent people, like if we can't digitize certain media, we send them to who in the community can. So stuff like that. Back to you, Emily.
Thank you. So instructional design to me becomes kind of one of the most important things that we do. And this is primarily going to be your master's holding librarians. Currently at UTC, both myself and one of our librarians has a library degree. The other one has a master's in music. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an MLS, although it is helpful. But to me, the real way that you advertise these services, and I think that this is true for all librarians, is your instruction classes. And so having a um, model based similar to your research and instruction team's instruction um, really helps bring people into it. And the nice thing about the librarians is that most faculty, they know how to assign a paper, but they don't know how to assign a video. My favorite is we always have people coming in and how they want their class of 25 students to each do a 20-minute documentary. And then we remind them that they have to watch all of them for 20 minutes. And so then it becomes a group project and they get down to like 8 minutes and it's great. But we're the people who can tell them what works for a multimedia project and what doesn't work for a multimedia project. We try and steer them away from what I call the just do something creative project, which, that can be anything from an interpretive dance to a brochure. And it's really good to narrow that down for the students because you wouldn't give a writing assignment that could be anything from a limerick to a 15-page paper. And it's the same here, but they don't necessarily know how the technology works. And so it's our job, both through our instructional design and through our teaching, to get the technology out of the way. I had a really nice interaction with a friend of mine who's a lecturer in English, who he has friends that are really techie and have been doing all kinds of cool stuff for years. And he really wanted to, but he knew if he asked his friends, they'd give him this high level answer and he'd just get confused. Whereas he sat down with me and we came up with a really simple answer to what he wanted to do without him having to learn too much. And so we started off with visual teaching philosophies. And then at the beginning of last semester, he said, I really want to do video essays. So, hey, that's coming a long way. And these are the people that then encourage the students to come into your space and use the stuff and learn how it goes. And so I actually pulled some numbers. So since 2019, we actually opened in 2015, but the numbers I could find only went back to 2019. We've taught 946 classes. And you can see that, of course, English is one of our biggest ones. That's because we have an English 1020 multimodal assignment. And if you look at the slides, there's a link to an article that I wrote about that. But some of our biggest things come from support for specific projects, such as the multimodal assignment, the Yuhan 1000 Brock documentaries. You can find those on YouTube. We've got our Art 1060 animation classes that happens every year. And then we've got Philosophy 2350 that for the past few years, it's been horror movies, but I think next year it's moving into dystopias and utopias. But they do a movie and these become campus events that advertise our space. And, a really easy one to get started with is support for EdTPA, which is national certification and requires them to put together videos that have to be a lot smaller than you'd think would need. Yeah, it's a silly, silly thing. But anyway, Here we are, we're ready for questions. That's our spiel. And once again, our book is The Complete Guide to Creative Technology Spaces in Academic Libraries. And I apparently was having trouble with links, so I don't know why Eric's email isn't underlined. But, you know, I'm almost good at technology. You can tell because I teach it.
All right. Thank you so much, Emily, Vanessa, and Eric. We will take questions at the end of the hour. Now coming next up are Alexander J. Carroll and Joshua Borsha, who are the co-authors of Essentials of STEM Librarianship. Welcome, Alex and Josh.
Great. Thank you for that, Ramon. And I'm really grateful that we get to follow Emily and her teams there, talking about that their book really is about the people, because I think fundamentally our book is about people too. So I'm Alex Carroll. I'm the associate director here at Vanderbilt University. I had the kind of distinct privilege of writing this book, Essentials of STEM Librarianship, with my colleague Josh, who's also here at Vanderbilt. And I would be remiss if I didn't, who isn't joining us, but we couldn't have been more thrilled to have Carroll Tenop here draft the foreword for this work. If you know anything about science and engineering libraries, you would know Carroll. She is really a luminary in our field and kind of a founding figure for it. So really grateful to have her introduce this work for us. So kind of two questions that we were thinking about when sharing this. Why did we decide to write a book about STEM librarianship, and why would anyone want to read it? That's what I think Josh and I'll try to answer here in our 10 minutes with you. The short answer as to why we wanted to write this book is because we're both STEM librarians and we think it's great, and we think more people should think it's great too. But I think maybe we'll give you a little more nuance and why we think that there are some structural, really pressing reasons why, as a field, we think academic libraries need to be thinking more about how do we position libraries to support STEM communities. So we're not going to deluge you with data here, but we do want to share one table that we open up our book in chapter 1 with, which really highlights something we think is a really pressing point, which is STEM majors are the fastest growing academic degree programs for undergraduates at really any baccalaureate kind of institution you can think of here. If we look at it from 2010 to 2020, we see a really fundamental shift here where the fastest growing programs for degree programs that offered more than 10,000 baccalaureate degrees across the United States were computer science, health professions, engineering, mathematics, right? All of those growing between 50 to 150% over that time. And on the flip side, right, because there's also been some decline in undergraduate enrollment, we've seen a lot of majors kind of lose undergraduate enrollment, right? And those would be things like English literature, foreign language, liberal arts, social science, and history. And so there's kind of a real fundamental shift here in what are our undergraduate students studying, right? We have more STEM majors than ever before. We have fewer humanists than ever before. And this creates kind of a real misalignment potential for academic libraries, because if we look at who is offering or where librarians are actually doing their academic work, and we see a total kind of misalignment with that, right? So Clark and Kim did a study a few years ago looking at using IPEDS data to see what is students enrolled in MLIS programs, what was their background in. And what we see is that almost 2/3 of students coming into MLIS programs have a background in the humanities or the social sciences, right? Really relatively few actually coming in from the STEM. And kind of, I don't want to pick on English too much, right? I'm a history major myself, right? But, we see that the plurality of MLIS candidates have an English degree, almost over 20% of them, compared to the entire student population of under 3%, right? And so this creates the opportunity, right, that we think there's a real potential challenge there that libraries need to be prepared to face on, right? Are we prepared to support these communities as student enrollment in them continues to grow, right? And this kind of is one of the central premises of our book, right? Is that these STEM communities are a really critical constituency on all of our campuses, but the needs of these community members are potentially different than the needs that we had as librarians, as undergraduates. And as a result, their needs may not necessarily be intuitive to those of us on academic library staffs. And then thinking forward, though, we think there's a solution here, right? And we think there are members on our college campuses, on our university campuses that are prepared to help bridge this gap. And we really see liaison librarians as central to this, right? We think liaison librarians are the people on our campuses that can connect academic libraries with STEM communities. If, and this is an important if, these liaison librarians are equipped with effective strategies for how to engage these communities, how to identify what matters to these communities, what needs these communities have. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Josh, who's going to talk a little bit about how this book goes about answering some of those questions.
Okay, thank you, Alex. And yes, liaison librarians, I think, are the perfect group to help scientists and engineers. There's so many of us on campus. We're already there and available to help find information with a few tweaks and helping answer a few unique questions to STEM. We can help these communities very well. So what types of questions will this book answer that will help folks transition over to helping people in STEM? One is, how can I identify the needs of STEM community members on campus? These needs are similar to, but sometimes unique to this group of students and faculty and staff. And so this book will kind of help answer those unique questions. Also, how can I connect my expertise with the campus's research expertise? So doing research, how does publishing work in STEM? How does what I already know based on my bachelor degree studies or MILS studies, how will that transition over to help STEM students? Also, how can I contribute to the teaching mission of my institution? How does the coursework look for STEM students? At what level should I engage with STEM students? When do they start doing research at an undergraduate level? How do I help graduate students working in STEM? What is their life like? And then how can I reach and engage with community members who may never set foot in the library? So folks in the humanities, some folks in social sciences may have more interaction with the library, interaction with physical collections more often, but it tends to be more true in many of the STEM fields that scientists and engineers are stuck in their labs all day, especially graduate students. They don't leave. And so you actually have to go out to them. How do you reach them? How do you connect with them in ways that are meaningful to them and help you actually engage with and reach this constituency? And then what skills will I need to thrive in these roles, both in terms of reaching out and knowledge base on tools and types of research and how publishing works as well. This leads us to who this book is for, to answer this question. So it can be used for LIS instructors looking to teach courses on academic libraries to help people working in those fields understand what is unique about students and faculty in STEM, as well as MLIS students interested in careers in these areas since they're growing areas in higher learning, and early career STEM librarians who already have some expertise helping in the field along with other liaisons, but who want to transition over more to helping people in STEM. Early to mid-career librarians interested in pivoting as well. And then at a higher level, managers and administrators within academic libraries who want to hire and develop STEM librarians, given the change in student population. And this one resonates with me quite a bit. I actually was a PhD student in computational chemistry from the University of Minnesota, and I transitioned over to information library science when I noticed important issues with data management and issues with publishing in the sciences that I thought I could help with. So this book will help understand how the meta science of information science can improve scientific research and engineering work at a higher level as well. Okay, so that leads into how this book will help. So this book is not meant to be read from beginning to end like a work of fiction. It's more like a guidebook. So you jump to the chapters that you need to read to resolve your specific problem. So it's broken up into 3 separate sections. Part 1, with chapters 1 through 5, is going to provide context, some of the fundamental epistemology behind science and engineering, how scientists think, as well as what the administrative groups look like within those areas and how you can reach out to them and connect with them and what their incentives are. And then part 2, chapters 6 through 9, will discuss skills and tools that scientists and faculty and staff in the sciences often use to gather data, to analyze data, as well as to read literature, find literature, organize literature. And then part 3, chapters 10 through 13, will explore strategies for designing service models to help connect with these students. So this is a way to help you take that context that you've learned and the knowledge about those tools that you've learned and apply them in a way that is meaningful to the people at your institution. So just to reiterate, this book is not meant to be read from chapter 1 until the end. It is meant to fit your needs, and it is designed to be easy to find the information you want to fit your needs and meet you at your level. So with that, I just want to say thank you all for listening. And if you'd like to reach out to myself or Alex, you can connect to us via email. And our book is available through the ALA store. And I really appreciate you all listening. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much, Joshua and Alex. Next up, we have Aisha Johnson, who is a contributor to The Legacy of Black Women in Librarianship When They Dare to Be Powerful, a part of the Critical Culture Information Studies series and edited by Nicole Cooke. Welcome, Aisha.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are having a lovely day. Thank you for joining us. I am here on behalf of Dr. Nicole Cooke to talk about the new book, The Legacy of Black Women Librarianship, and really when they dared to be powerful. I am Aisha Johnson. I serve as the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and Outreach at Georgia Institute of Technology, better known as Georgia Tech in good old Atlanta, Georgia. I'm an advocate, I'm an educator, I'm a scholar. Just a brief about myself, but this is about the work of Dr. Nicole Cooke, Augusta Baker Endowed Chair and Professor at University of South Carolina. Dr. Cooke is actually the editor for the Critical Cultures Information Studies series, in which you will see one other title today within this series. So it's pretty special work that she's doing with the American Library Association. So very proud of that and happy to represent on her behalf. So the legacy of Black women in librarianship, this book is absolutely wonderful, amazing. I may be biased as a contributor, but I really learned more than I thought I even knew about these honorees, as I would like to call them. It discovers important stories about many trailblazing Black women who fought racism, sexism, and other hardships in their libraries, their communities, to become leaders of our profession, being, movers and shakers and pioneers, really. Of course, Black women have historically been hidden figures in librarianship, and yet the advocacy level, the passion, the courage, and tenacity really paved the way for future generations of knowledge workers, library workers, and quite honestly, information profession in general, which is something that we've long wanted to highlight and have highlighted in various works. So it's really wonderful to be able to not only bring together not only the authors, but also the honorees in one package, if you will, to share with those who are seasoned professionals, mid-career, all levels, including, of course, our new professional and LIS students. So this profiles 16, to be exact, 16 dozen librarians, book champions, activists, and pioneers of the profession from across the country. And it is a powerful work of archival storytelling meant to inspire readers both inside and outside of the library field. Why inside and outside of the library field? Well, I like to call the profession, library and information science, but namely librarianship, I like to call us a warm blanket profession. And I like to refer to us as a warm blanket profession because much like a warm blanket, it just makes everything better, right? There's not a single profession that does not need information literacy. That's what makes us so special because we do blend and make every single discipline better. It is my warm blanket theory. So it is important for us to highlight a time of discrimination, a time of segregation when this warm blanket was not so welcoming, and noting the legacy of Black women in librarianship because it's really all about advocacy. It's about representation and inclusion of not just Black women or African American people, but all of us in which we have chose to serve. That's what librarians do, right? We are here to serve all communities. So we're in this piece There's personal stories of advocacy and resilience, and it spans the entire 20th century, which is really beautiful because you get perspective on progression in the field as it relates to Black women in librarianship as well. It stretches from the rural South and Florida, South Carolina and Florida to urban centers like, of course, New York and LA. And it profiles well-known figures such as Augusta Baker and Eliza Atkins Gleason, as well as those who you may not know as well, but are absolutely due respect, such as Dr. Jessie Carney Smith. And, give these women their flowers. So we grapple with toxic legacy of segregation in library education, libraries, archives, the entire GLAM profession, universities, public library schools, and other institutions. The beauty, or one of the pieces, the additional piece and beauty in this scholarship is these women were not selected solely based on the library type, but they were selected for their impact, for their advocacy, for their intentionality. A true demonstration how Black women dare to strive and work towards more equitable futures, not only for us, but everyone. And of course, it aims to encourage LIS students and librarians of all backgrounds to see themselves reflected in the profession's long and rich heritage and constantly growing. We shed light on how librarianship can become ever more diverse and community-centered, because that's what we say we're going to do. That is a core of our mission. That is a core of our values, is servicing all people. So you'll see a few running themes throughout. If you want to code them or catalog them, that's a library joke. If you want to catalog them, the themes would be breaking barriers as pioneers and advocates, information access and knowledge production, especially information equity, mentorship and community building, social justice, and of course, institutional information and reform in that social justice and information equity aspect, where we want to ensure representation and inclusion in every single thing that we do. So to highlight those 16 chapters, which makes up, of course, of 24 contributors, considering the prologue, which is a beautiful poem by Jennifer Boykin. And of course, I authored the afterword for the piece, a true pleasure and honor to be able to summarize and wrap up the impact of such scholarship to the profession. But you'll see some key names that you are familiar with. You'll see, I would suspect, a number of names that you haven't been familiar with. I myself are pretty familiar as a social historian within this profession. I'm familiar with a couple of, most of, I would say most of these women, but in every single chapter, all chapters, I learned something new about these honorees. And I think that is the beauty of the profession. We are lifelong learners, we're forever learners, and we're always open to understanding where we came from so we can be better in where it is that we are going. So again, this is edited by Dr. Cooke, the editor for the Critical Cultures information series under American Library Association, and of course the link there for purchase, support, and exploring. Thank you all.
Great, thank you so much, Aisha. Next up, we have back from yesterday, Meredith, Kahn, and Kelly McElroy, who are the co-authors of Organize Your Library, Developing the Collective Power of Library Workers, again, the second book in our Critical Cultural Information series. Welcome, Meredith and Kelly.
Great. Thank you so much, Ramon, and thanks everyone for taking the time to be here today. Our co-authors, Angelo Moreno and Emily Drabinsky, couldn't be here, but we're happy to give you a quick overview of what is involved in our new book, Organize Your Library, Developing the Collective Power of Library Workers.
So one of the first questions that our book answers is, what is a union and why do you need one? Now, a union, very simply stated, is the way that you and your coworkers come together to advocate for your shared interests at work. And we think it's the best way to safeguard our rights and welfare on the job and to protect against undue political influence or the capricious interference of management. And building collective power through a union, through a collective bargaining agreement, expands the possibilities for change in your workplace. Starting a union will not solve all of the problems at your library, but unions can be a powerful tool for transformation. And finally, another reason you might need a union is that solidarity is good for morale. And in difficult times, it can feel good to come together with your coworkers and do something.
So how do you get started in that? And this is much of what we have in the book, covers the sort of nuts and bolts for how to get started with organizing and move through different parts of that process. But building worker power starts with organizing, which we define as getting people to take action together. It looks sort of like this: agitate, educate, inoculate, make an ask, follow up, and repeat. And we reiterate all of these points throughout the book. Agitation is about helping people be critical of, reflect on what's going on in their workplace and recognize where there's capacity for change. Educate is about helping people see the possibilities that are out there that may have happened in other workplaces. Inoculation is really about recognizing that there might be blowback from the employer. There might be, it might not be straight sailing to get things done. Making it an ask is a really important piece of how we actually get things done together. So step by step, having something that people can commit to following through. And then you've got to follow up with them. And then we do this all again and again for basically in perpetuity. It's important to know your rights. So much of what we do in unions is about standing up publicly to assert our rights in the workplace, whether that's organizing a union and getting recognized, winning a contract, and then enforcing the contract. So it's important to know what you have available to you. And then finally, this is something our co-author Emily often says is you got to make a list and then you got to talk to everyone on the list. And I would add, and then follow up and repeat.
So a big feature of the book is the stories of library workers from across the country. So we interviewed about 36 library workers from public libraries, academic libraries, school libraries, and we talked to them about the process of building power in the workplace and exercising that power. And the stories that we heard were really wonderful. And I think that they actually add something unique. They really make a unique contribution to the conversation about labor in libraries. And so we have these wonderful stories throughout the book, and these are just some quotes from our chapter about campaigns. And these are librarians, library workers talking about the importance of taking action together in the workplace and what that meant to them in their workplace. And so what are campaigns? Campaigns can include a recognition drive to form your union and get it recognized. It could be the contract fight, so winning a fair contract, or other kinds of issue or action campaigns. And campaigns are often the method by which a union gets something done together with its membership. And our guidance for campaigns, to boil it down simply, is sort of 4 points. That campaigns are big group projects and they can't be accomplished alone. And throughout a campaign, always be organizing. Just like Kelly was explaining before, organizing is a process where we get people to do things together because we're more effective together. Most campaigns also feature an escalation curve. So escalation is a strategic decision to put pressure on an employer to help them see the wisdom of taking the action that you're asking them to take. And then finally, making space for joy. So having it be fun, having it be an experience where you and your colleagues coming together to do something big and important. Yes, it can be stressful, but it can also be a lot of fun. And these are just some nice photos from a recent contract campaign we had at the University of Michigan to achieve a second contract for librarians, archivists, and curators. We held an event on the front steps of the graduate library, and we got lots of our members and even allies to come out together and to demonstrate the employer that we were serious about getting the contract done.
The book isn't only the how-to of how to do all the nuts and bolts of union work. It also contains our vision for the future. This is one of the a quotation from one of the library workers we spoke with that really focuses in on the importance of solidarity. So recognizing that we have more in common than we have in different, and that our futures are linked. So we really see labor organizing as one of the pathways for library workers to help make not just their workplaces, but our profession and our communities stronger. And these are some of the points we walk through in that chapter. So really tied to what Meredith was saying about joy, it's important to celebrate our wins. Things are rough out there, but every win, big or small, is important to recognize and honor. In the book, we make the case that library worker unions contribute to better library services for the community. Teachers' unions have really popularized the phrase that teaching working conditions for teachers are learning conditions for students. And the same is true in our libraries. So where we work is where our students study and where faculty come to get their the information that they need. So improvements to that workplace are better for our users. It's important not to see issues in your workplace as disconnected from what's happening more broadly. I think in this particular moment, that's probably fairly self-evident, but our workplaces are part of a broader fabric in society, and political issues come up at work, all kinds of things, and we have to recognize that the struggles we have in the workplace are not limited to that workplace. We invite people to fight against the systems and structures that limit our capacity to build worker power and make positive change. And we actually have some stories in the book about library workers who have gotten together and done work to change laws in their states that will now enable them to form a union and do collective bargaining. So there is hope. And then finally, I think, again, to reiterate, I think what both Meredith and I have said is organizing is really about doing something, but doing it together because we're always stronger when we come together.
And this is a nice photo of my colleagues and allies on campus doing something together. We are very excited to share this book with you all. It will be coming out this fall. And we think it really makes a unique contribution to the conversation about labor in libraries. And we think this is really a fabulous moment for that. When we started writing the book, it was sort of a different world. But we think that the lessons that we learned in talking to library workers, they are just as relevant, if not more relevant than they were then. And so we're very excited to get this work out there into the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Meredith and Kelly. Next up to discuss organizing of a different yet related kind is Patricia Franks, author of Records and Information Management, 3rd edition. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you very much. Let me grab my slides here if I can do that, and I'll be right with you. Well, can you all see that? This is a little different. The library and information field that you mentioned deals with the public and with clients that are external to the type of operations that we handle in records and information management. We're kind of behind the scenes, so I can listen to your presentations and I could say that's where we're important. For example, Eric mentioned hiring staff, whether they're hourly or salaried. Well, somebody's managing a financial information system. Somebody's got an HR system and has to manage those records as well. I listened to the STEM presentation and looked at that data. Somebody's managing that data. Is that clean data? Is that good data? Somebody's responsible for that behind the scenes. And when Aisha talked about equity and inclusion, there's a lot of bias that may be included in hiring practices, and especially now with AI that's used in order to determine who should be called in for interviews, who should be selected. And we've got to be really careful when we're working on models and providing input into those who are developing them to make sure that we remove that type of bias. And then even in the fourth one, when we're listening to the presentation on advocating for unions. Well, as a teacher, I'm in a union, and unions are there. But on the other side of it, the organization that has union workers have to be very careful to maintain that information about the contract, about the agreement. They have to get in there and not only work on what are the demands, but also what is the financial position of the institution and can you accommodate many of those demands. So that's all behind the scenes that records and information processing experts are able to contribute to. So in this book, we start out with the expectation that records management professionals can help manage content, whether it's data, information, or records, from creation all the way through disposition. And there are times when that data is more important than other times, or I should say more relevant to the activities that are taking place within the organization. So where is the data, the information, the records that we're talking about? Well, we have a little first chapter on evolution, and I want you to take a look at that hieroglyphic tablet, stone tablet up in the upper left-hand corner there. And if you think back, that's like 3000 BC when it was created. And what it shows in southern Iraq is the distribution of beer. Who's allocated how much beer. So even then we were worried about keeping records. And in fact, what's interesting to me is that's the size of today's iPhone. Basically the same size. But also we have physical records we worry about. We've got paper records. Somebody mentioned microfilm. At one time, people thought, well, this is great. Instead of just paper, let's microfilm everything, and we're going to keep that in storage. It can last for a very long time, and it doesn't take up as much space. The problem now is trying to get the data off it so that we can work with it if we need to. And so that brings us to the electronic records, and electronic records are everywhere. They're within our premise. You've got them in your library, but they're also in the cloud. You're already interacting with cloud services, for example. So records and information managers have to be aware of all of the content they're responsible for, wherever it may be, and in whatever type of technology it was produced or is maintained. This is where records information managers now are the core, the center of information governance, as far as I'm concerned. Just take a look at the middle of that chart, and you'll see that we're creating and receiving, protecting, retaining, transferring, using, and disposing of valuable content. But on the outside, records managers are no longer alone in this. When they had paper records and you typed up a letter and you put it in a file cabinet right next to you, you can handle that. But now we're working with experts across the organization, from IT, security, privacy, risk management, the legal area, and business, in order to determine how best to create, capture, manage, preserve all of the content that is of value to the organization. So we have to learn how to interact with all of those stakeholders. And in this book, we have 28 different contributions from experts who are thought leaders and practitioners in the field, not only of records information management, but related fields of privacy, security, data governance, that are contributing to the conversation. So at the end of each of the 14 chapters that I wrote, I bring in 2 experts to contribute their thoughts. One of the areas that is always new, but has been in all of the editions of this book, this is the third, is the emerging technologies. And it's always fun to take a look at what's emerging in each edition of this book. But right now, we're thinking about the metaverse. And in the upper left-hand corner of the screen you're looking at, what is the metaverse? Well, oh, it's big, and it's the infrastructure and the human interface and the spatial computing and the ability to discover the information and the experiences that we're all engaged in. And there are so many specific areas that we could take a look at in there. I pulled out just 4 on the left-hand side to show you what is included in this chapter. We talk about blockchain, distributed ledger technology, which is a really good way to ensure that the information that is placed within the blockchain remains and without alteration. And then Web3, what do we mean by that? Our ability to go out and work with information that is all over connected through hyperlinks, as we know, but it's much more than that now. The metaverse itself, as I mentioned, I expand a little bit more on that. And then digital twins. And digital twins is kind of an interesting concept where it's not just a simulation. You want to see how your library might work, you can make a twin of it. But as the data comes in, that twin changes. And so it's always updated in real time. And there are records being produced all along the way. So when we get excited about using all of this technology, somebody back there like me is saying, whoa, wait a minute, you're creating records. What are we going to do with them? How are we going to manage them? And I have a few examples here. One is e-commerce with a visual art gallery. Somebody is selling these, but who is capturing the information about those sales? How are you doing that? We're responsible for that. And as I mentioned, the digital twins, there are records of that as well. And we have to be sure that we are keeping those records as well. And then a new chapter, that emerging technology was not new. It's always there, but it's always different. This one is a brand new chapter now because of the emphasis on data governance and automation and the next step, artificial intelligence. And so we really look in here at those 3 different aspects of managing content today. And we have to look at it in a strategic way. So we do have to address the data, and librarians are so familiar with metadata, and it's more important than ever. And then also the processes that are being used. And down at the bottom, you see a little bit of the artificial intelligence, how it's grown and morphed over the years from the 1950s, where it was introduced, as far as at least a name, a definition, through machine learning, through deep learning, and now with the Gen AI. And all of this works in different ways, depending on what your reason for incorporating AI into your processes might be. And then another new chapter is one on leadership and management, because if I talk to you about archives, records management, information governance, those are not just technologies that we're using. Those are fields of management where you work with people. So I remember when we used to try to help students in high school decide what kind of careers they wanted to go into, we talk about, would you rather work with people? Would you rather work with things? Would you rather work with technology? We've got to work with everything. And so we have to learn how to work with people to not only manage them, but also to lead them. In this book, we talk a lot about change management, about different leadership styles, different management styles. And we note that leadership is not just about titles and positions or flow charts. It's about our ability to influence. And one of the examples here is a Scrum, an agile project management framework. We get into project management, and it helps to structure and manage work through values, principles, practices. Values are throughout everything. Ethics are at our core. And why do we use that term Scrum? Is that a name for something special? Is it an acronym? No, it's not. Take a look at the bottom right corner there, and you'll see people playing a game. And it's just a sport of rugby, and they're into a scrum. But what we do now is use it to illustrate how our people would work together in order to achieve a certain outcome. So in this book, as I mentioned, not only am I looking at the information I thought was important for somebody going into this field today, but also what do the 28 guest authors think about it? What can they tell us? And I've got just a few examples here. One of the individuals who is a metadata and standards analyst up at the Bank of Canada wrote on generative AI, authenticity, and digital provenance. And he sees this as an opportunity for those of us in this field to be more important than ever. And then another person, Megan, from the Indiana Archives and Records Administration, talks about trying to govern all of the chats and the different communications going on in Microsoft Teams. Probably a lot of you are using Teams, or you're thinking this is really great, but how do I organize it? What are records? What do we have to keep? How long do we have to keep them? That's what she's struggling with. And then also Jim Merrifield was talking about rethinking disaster preparedness in the age of ransomware, a strategic imperative. Remember I said information governance, we've got to look at security as well. Cybersecurity is included. And then we have Chris Stenson, who is really a thought leader in the area of records management. He works at the Oregon State Archives as their records manager. And he talked about a project he really wanted to get into with AI, but how practical is it? Take a look at the financial implications. Take a look at the cost it will be in use of your personnel, your resources in order to train AI models, for example. Maybe we can't get there, but where can we go? We've got to embrace the imperfect in order to someday make progress toward what we envision as the perfect. And then Robin Heiss, the records manager at Greene County Archives, says maybe one technology is not enough. Maybe we need two or more solutions in order to achieve what we want to. And so she talked about the year that they implemented both ArchiveSpace and Preservica for electronic records preservation and archives management. And the last one, Salvador Barragan, is the director of data governance and data mining right now. But he was a student of mine, earned his doctorate not too long ago, and he's talking about the synergy of AI and data governance and management. How do we navigate this new era of data? So those are just a few of the 28 fantastic, I think, entries that we have to supplement the 14 chapters in this book. So my little note that I think is also in the intro is that even though we're in this perpetual state of socio-technical change, there's one constant. Data, records, information are still created. They're managed, they're used, they're shared, they're retained, and disposed of or preserved for future generations. And this book and our field of archives and records management is more important than ever. And that's it for my thoughts on this. I think the importance of our book and the importance of our field.
Thank you so much, Pat. Thank you to all our presenters today. There will very shortly be an audience Q&A and discussion with all of the authors, lasting up until, let's say, 2:30 Central or so. But I wanted to let you know in advance of that. This event has been recorded, and it can be accessed as early as this evening on the main American Library Association YouTube page. And if you like this event and want to sign up for other free events produced by Editions, go ahead and visit alieditions.org/events. Again, that is alieditions.org/events. We do have one more event for all library workers scheduled for tomorrow at 1 p.m. Central. And then on June 9th at 9:30 a.m. Central, we have an event about well-being and stress reduction tips for library workers. So do join us for both of those. I want to welcome back all of our authors to turn on their cameras and their audio as we begin our discussion and Q&A. There are quite a few questions from the live audience in the chat, but we will start with pre-submitted questions to begin with once everybody is back with their cameras and their audio on. I think you are all there. Great. Our first pre-submitted question is for the authors of A Complete Guide to Creative Technology Spaces in Academic Libraries. That is Eric, Vanessa, and Emily. It is, what skills do you hope your student employees leave with?
I always hope that they leave with killer problem-solving skills. When we do our training, when we switched over to a new studio manager, like we have the standard training that everybody does. And when she revamped it, she went in and put in YouTube links and like all of these things to help them do the tasks. And I made her take them out because part of the point of the training is teaching them how to Google stuff. And she was, I just wanted the things that would have been helpful for me. And I'm like, true, but we want them to find it themselves. And we really do have students with killer problem solving skills. Like if they don't know the answer, they will be able to go find it.
My students that I've talked to that have come back to say hi after graduation have said that what really helped is that they had to learn more software while working there than they did coming in, and that really helped them find jobs after graduation.
And I'd add a sort of sideways response to it too, which is that one of the slides mentioned that often this is a student's first jobby job. And I think one of the things that we're really conscious of is trying to just train them to become professional people, like realizing that they're working to a schedule and that they're responsible to, do certain tasks and that kind of thing. And we try to be really lenient and understanding because of course they're students first. But one of the things we want to help prepare them for is sort of the work that they'll be doing afterwards. Often a lot of them are doing creative work. And so it's sort of an interesting question about whether they're going to be in a traditional office setting or not. But, many skills about being sort of, a responsible adult, quote unquote, can start out of spaces like ours.
I would say the flip side of that is what it looks like to be in a position where you are respected as an employee so that they know what to look for if their boss is doing something that would be exploitative or weird, to know, to be like, they didn't do that at my last job, so maybe I should ask the question.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Related question for the STEM authors, and actually I think the organized authors, and maybe all of you might be interested in answering this one. It is, what are some of the most important soft and hard skills for STEM librarians, especially those who are early in their careers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So maybe I'll talk about some of the soft skills and Josh can talk about some of the hard skills there. So I think actually one of the main things that we talk a lot about with this book is that the soft skills are really kind of essential to this, right? And that in a lot of ways, the kind of indispensable thing that you as a liaison are doing is identifying the people that are in your community, connecting with them, using empathy. And, this came up with the creative technology folks too, when they were talking about this, that the empathy and curiosity are really essential skills to what you're doing here, right? Of recognizing that the dean of engineering versus the department chair of mechanical engineering versus the director of undergraduate studies in chemistry all have different priorities. They all have different kind of pressures they're under, different incentive structures. And there's different kind of touch points for you as a liaison to connect with and to bring the library into. And so a lot of what we talk about is in the book is the importance of those kinds of things. And then thinking about kind of what are programmatic strategies you can do to identify who those important people are on your campus and how can you routinely and kind of systematically connect with them over time to build a really robust kind of service model around really what their needs are, rather than kind of what is interesting to you as a librarian, which may be either tangentially at best or not at all directly related to what they're interested in. And Josh can maybe talk a little bit about what we see as some of the hard skills then you can implement once you're in the room with them.
Yeah, so I want to add some soft skills before jumping into the hard skills, but scientists, engineers are notoriously, or at least on average, not the best at communicating their research in a general way to people, in a way that connects with them. And so I think that teaching them how to organize and write a paper in a way, or give a presentation in a way that connects with people narratively, in a way that allows them to get the main points and to remember the main conclusions of the work without feeling overwhelmed by the methods or the techniques involved, is vital to communicating science and engineering concepts and research in general. But I also think that helping students understand how to connect with their colleagues within their lab and in different labs to understand the common problems that they all face is something that we all, or all science engineering students, need to, I think, do more often. And I think that's something librarians can help with. That was certainly something I struggled with. I had blinders on. I only went to my lab. I got a little depressed. So librarians, they can go to various labs, realize, oh, all these people are having the same issue, get people together, communicate the common problems, and come up with a general solution, which is one of the reasons I think liaisons are so vital to doing this work. But then building on that, the hard skills, and one of the reasons I moved from computational chemistry into information science, is data management and organization. That's something that librarians learn and learn how to teach. And it can often feel intimidating to try and communicate that. People often think that you need highly technical skills, especially with organizing code or organizing files, data science type of skills, how to use Python and R. But actually, what we found is that it's actually fairly low level technical skill, just how to name files consistently, how to organize things on a project level in a meaningful way, how to write a good README and get comments and make things easier with a simple set of tools. Most of those things improve data management within research labs by a great deal without requiring a huge level of technical expertise.
Great answer. I have another question that nicely connects actually the STEM librarianship book with the legacy of Black women in librarianship. And Aisha, you may need to draw from some of the other chapters in the book, as well as your overall work with the other contributors and Nicole in answering this. But it is in conducting research for the book along with its other contributors, what overlap did you discover between the development of Black women's legacy in librarianship and the development of their legacy in STEM professions, such as the hard sciences specifically?
So, thank you. So I mentioned the running themes throughout the book. And because of the time period that we are talking about, you're going to see some of those exact same running themes in the STEM-based professions as well. So it's really all rooted in advocacy for representation and inclusion, really, right? I think when I think about STEM, I think about Katherine Johnson. And we are very well aware of, the movie Hidden Figures. But she gone through that decades and decades prior, and she gets her flowers and then passes in 2020, right? So I think about what we're actually watching now with Dr. Carla Hayden and the newly minted Dr. Cindy Landrum, deputy director turned acting director over IMLS. So, for me, the overlap is still happening because we're still witnessing these struggles for representation and inclusion. But we also have to look at the advocacy that happens for information access, equity, and literacy in STEM. It mirrors that of librarianship. These women, much like women of STEM, are breaking barriers as pioneers, community builders. They are fighting systematic racism by all means during segregation, during discriminatory times where there really is no control, but it's calculated advocacy, right? Because even though there is a lose in it somewhere, somehow, there's still a greater win. And it's not just about self. And I see that with women in STEM, it's about the impact for everyone. Science is the benefactor, society is the benefactor of all things science based. right? Librarianship is everybody benefits from everything related to librarianship, archives, galleries, museums, right? So there's a lot of overlap there. And I think naturally, one of the things that we may um, underestimate is the level of mentorship that happens with women in STEM and women in librarianship, namely Black women in librarianship, mentoring, coaching, developing community. And it's not just community of Black women, it's community of, respectfully, I say, us, they, them, meaning everyone that is not the majority. So we have all these discussions about DEI and not being pro diversity or what have you, but DEI in itself, much like librarianship and STEM, is really about inclusion. At the base of this, it's really about inclusion. And I think that's the main overlap, inclusion for reform and innovation.
Excellent. Another point of overlap between your book, Aisha's, and that of some of the other authors, as well as some of the work that Pat and Alex and others have done outside of their primary working profession, is just history and revealing histories. So I'm curious to know from the organized authors, as well as from Pat and maybe the STEM authors as well, what is something surprising that you learned about the history of unions or records management or STEM and through your work in your books? And you can start with the organized authors.
Yeah. So I did quite a bit of reading about the history of unions in libraries, and some of this history was already well known to me, but a fun little fact that I discovered was the summer of 1971 in Berkeley, California. That was a summer in which there were strikes for library workers at both the University of California, Berkeley, and the Berkeley Public Library. So in one summer, library workers at both institutions had strikes. And in both cases, they successfully got raises and they fought back on cuts to library services. And so that was just like a fun little nugget to discover that in that one summer, there were these different kinds of library workers who had both fought and won.
Kelly, did you have an answer that you wanted to get to? Okay. What about you, Pat or Alex?
I was going to say I don't think it was a surprise to me because of all my research, but I think one of the new things that individuals reading this book should recognize is that while we look at AI to help us in our work, AI is going to produce records in itself. And so we have been taking a look at what we're calling paradata. It's that extra data, the information that's not captured as metadata or in content that should be captured about the entire AI process from planning stage all the way through evaluation, remediation, sunset of the project. And it would include things that NIST, for example, is telling us that we've got to look to for risk management of AI. Things like access logs, but also decisions made on why you're using that model, and also impact on the population that is going to be affected by the use of AI. So when I mentioned before bias in hiring processes, what kind of decisions did the organization make when they went to use the AI product, and can they prove that it was done in a responsible manner? And they may have to go back to who created the AI model in the first place that was used. And I think when we talk about social justice or bias, we see that in some of the lawsuits against police departments, where in 3 cases that I'm aware of, Black individuals were arrested. One was a gentleman, another one was a woman who was pregnant, visibly pregnant, arrested for crimes that were committed and taken to jail in front of their children, and then come to find out they didn't even look like the AI images. It didn't even look like them. And I mentioned the pregnant woman because there was a picture of someone who was not pregnant. It was not long ago. And so from that is resulting, I think, lawsuits that will bring to the fore, and already is doing that, the need to responsibly use the AI product, but not just was the product faulty, who's making these decisions? What kind of detective went out with use the human in all of this? And so I guess those are just some of the things I'm thinking about, is that somebody has to document the new AI process. These are new records. There are a lot of reasons for doing that. And records managers should be in the forefront, I think, because we've been doing that all along, but now it's just a different type of technology that the organization and also people impacted by the AI should have available to them.
Right. What are the thoughts of some of the other authors on today about the impact of AI on their work and just the outlook? Do you consider it to be a significant challenge for the profession, or do you consider it to be primarily a benefit in terms of how it can be used in your specialized work? And maybe we can start with the creative technology in academic libraries.
Generally speaking, I wouldn't say I'm the fan of the generative AI, if you will. I do teach a graphic design course that we're focused on teaching skills in like InDesign and Illustrator and how to compose certain items. So for those projects, I go ahead and let them use a generated AI image because I would rather them focus on building templates and designs instead of spending 3 hours on Google Image trying to find the perfect image.
Yeah, I think kind of where I stand is Adobe's added a lot of really interesting tools, which I think move in the direction of what AI should be, which is doing the tedious work that you don't want to do, such as, because it can take hours to remove a background, but now you can do it instantly in Photoshop. So I think that's really interesting. I think where we stand with the creative technologies is learning how to use it like a tool rather than like a crutch, or and think about how you're using it. I did a really great class about Broadway musicals over the fall, and they had to take a favorite Broadway musical and change one thing. And so they did a lot of Adobe Firefly and generated images, and that really helped them get their ideas across more clearly than it would have if they'd just written it. And so that was really a lot of fun, but also, you know, you have to be careful. There's a lot of other issues with AI. And so making sure that we're paying attention to what's happening is kind of where it goes, and that we don't accidentally destroy creative fields, you know. But one of the nice things from instruction is it is a lot harder to get ChatGPT right now. It's a lot harder to get ChatGPT to do your whole paper, your whole movie for you, or your whole podcast for you, because at some point you have to speak yourself. So that's really opened up a lot of doors to more reluctant instruction or departments for us.
Yeah, we're finding that sort of we end up being a sort of natural center for conversations around libraries and AI, you know, centers like ours, spaces like these in libraries. And certainly not the only one. I mean, a lot of libraries have lots of different people kind of contributing to that, but especially in the generative side of the sort of the non-textual generative AI side. Oscar Keyes, who's one of our other co-authors, is liaisoning to a bunch of different AI conversations on campus about that, and really has carved out a really interesting spot around sort of the, you know, the practical, like really what is AI doing? Like what is this thing that people are talking about? Those questions, and then also kind of the ethical considerations and sort of how those things marry together and how they affect sort of creative people, right? Because there are creative folks who very much want to explore this as a tool of their creativity, and there are creative people who oppose any use of it whatsoever. And so trying to sort of figure out how to navigate all that tension and then also help students with it all is kind of interesting.
Oh, fun little story. I was using Adobe's AI for fixing audio in Adobe Speech Enhance. And if I set the AI too high, it got rid of my speech impediment, and I no longer sounded like me anymore. So I had to bring it down a bit.
So from our perspective, and one of the chapters in our book talks about this a little bit, is that teaching AI or using AI is kind of an inevitability within writing and research. It's going to be used more often. It's used in coding and data analysis. It's incorporated into GitHub. It's incorporated into any sort of coding environment, even word processing tools. And so it's important for us to teach students its limitations and to communicate to them what it does well and what it does badly and what is unethical potentially about using it. And if you can get those points across in a way that the students remember them, then one of the papers that we published recently, they tend to feel more confident in using AI, and they tend to use it in ways that are more productive and to help them learn rather than just use it to write a whole paper for them. So we've invested in certain AI tools. One of them is called Scite, SCITE, which is a retrieval augmented generation tool that only uses research papers. And we have them use that in combination with traditional searching techniques involving Boolean operators, et cetera, to find a subset of papers, as well as brainstorm, as well as get summaries of fields that they may not fully and completely understand to get started. And for those things, I think it is very useful, and it's going to be used more and more, and it's going to get better and better.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that that chapter was incredibly challenging. I think Patricia and I had to write, we were writing that in like the late 2023, trying to guess where we thought this technology would be in 2025. I think it's held up okay, but that was it was a funny thing to try to build that plane while we were flying it, so to speak. And I think the other thing that we kind of think is really interesting about showing these AI tools is just it really connects with the students, right? Because what these tools are, right, is they are fairly ubiquitous and they're fairly imperfect, which makes them really, really rich context for working with students. So we found it to be kind of a really successful way to connect with students when we're in the classroom. And we've also found that they actually align fairly well with a lot of the existing frameworks a lot of librarians already have for thinking about information literacy. So I think there can be somewhat tempting to think about these AI tools as a total paradigm shift, and we have to come up with a whole new AI literacy framework and all those sorts of things. But what we found actually is that kind of putting these tools in dialogue with some of the other traditional discovery tools we have really kind of facilitates things like lateral reading, right? So putting the AI tool on generated response next to kind of the gold standard reference material. They've got two different reported values for the PSI for breaking concrete. Why do we think these are different, right? Which one do we trust more? Why do you trust it more? And it really is kind of a fun way to actually get the students to critically engage in a way that we always talk about, but I think sometimes can be when you get stuck in the rut of just showing them Web of Science or just showing them Scopus, you don't actually do. So in that way, I think it's kind of been a fun kind of challenge for us to kind of grapple with how to use these tools.
And if I can just add,
go ahead.
sorry, quickly, from a labor perspective, there are obviously concerns with how AI is getting used and who is trying to get people to use it or not use it. I will say in my union's most recent negotiations, we created a new labor management committee to look at exactly these things. And I think this is true to echo what Alex said. Whenever there's new technologies, they affect how people do their work. I think about things like Canvas as an example where there are really good things that make people's jobs easier, and there are things that make that job harder or create new risks. So I just want to throw that out there as part of the ethical concern.
Sure. And we think about how central AI was to the SAG-AFTRA and Writers Guild strikes. And so why wouldn't it also be central to, the work of other people in literacy and creative professions? I have a question here in the chat, really a direct one, I think, for Alex and Joshua. Is STEM Essentials the first book in STEM librarianship? I can't remember seeing any other book work about this field. Is it out there, or are we just missing it?
No, I mean, to our knowledge, I think it is the first kind of book level treatment of this. And, I would say that it is a STEM librarianship book. And, the first two parts of the book, kind of as Josh highlighted, really are that. What I would say is that the third part of the book, which is really more about liaison service models and staffing academic libraries and aligning with institutional priorities, I think has a lot for kind of anyone that is in liaison services more broadly, or anyone who's in kind of academic library management. It's very much a STEM librarianship book. We tried to create some hooks that would appeal to folks outside of STEM librarianship as well.
Great. Kind of similar question for Aisha. Do you know other biographies or books that are about Black women in librarianship? And then also, what are some of the ways in which the women profiled in this book were shaped or influenced by their communities?
There's a special issue with Libraries, Cultures, History, and Society, a double issue on more Black women librarians. So check that out. Um, I think that, of course, we can go nature versus, nurture argument, but I think anybody from any background, any community will be shaped by the things they've experienced in life, right? Considering this time period and where America was, um, some of these women are natural born leaders, but all of them are natural born advocates. And I think that is the key piece here with environment, right? Community building and making sure all voices are heard. It's just really reflective of the time period and where we are, but where we were trying to push past as well.
Great answer. I have a kind of related question from Elizabeth Bittner in the chat, which is about why more people are in certain professions within librarianship or in the profession period. Her question is specifically for the STEM authors. Do we know why librarians mostly come from liberal arts backgrounds? Do STEM majors want to go into librarianship but are turned off by the pay, the working conditions? Or is that something that isn't even considered? And maybe the other authors on can also talk about what they think causes the deficit of representation or interest in their fields. But first, we'll start with the STEM authors.
So we can go quickly just so other folks can chime in too on their areas. So one of the things that was interesting, you asked the question about history earlier, that we kind of found is that there's kind of historically been a paucity of folks with STEM backgrounds or STEM interests in academic libraries. You can find articles in like college and research libraries from the 1970s talking about how there aren't enough folks interested in this work or doing this work. And kind of every decade or so since, there's always been an article talking about this. And so it's kind of a perennial issue, and that I think, it would be speculating to kind of guess why folks come to libraries from what they do. I think for a lot of folks, right, there still is the idea that libraries are about books. And so if you're a bookish person, you go into libraries. If you're someone that does pipetting in a lab or you type into spreadsheets, you don't. And so I think there's some of that there. I think also there's a little bit of a flywheel or a negative feedback cycle here too. And Josh, you can chime in here, where I suspect that if you are in biology or in chemistry and you never had a librarian come into your classroom, right, and talk about how to use these tools, you never even would have thought that this is a career that you could possibly do. Josh, did you ever have a librarian come into any of your classes as an undergrad?
As an undergrad, no. As a PhD student, for 5 minutes in our introductory session, a librarian came in.
And so I think there's probably some of that too, right? Is that students' imagination are bounded by what they see, right? Whereas, you see if you're a history or an English student, you probably met with that liaison and they gave you a sense that this is a career path, even if it was for one guest lecture. And that just doesn't happen for engineers.
Interesting. Pat, did you have any thoughts about bulwarks or impediments to the diversification of your field? Or is it an issue?
I don't know. I saw a question in the chat that asked about our work touching many different fields and how do we keep relevant to everything. And I think in our field, the point is just that organizations make decisions and conduct actions that have to be recorded. And so it doesn't matter what environment you're working in. If you stick with that, then you know that's the basic. How do you capture? How do you manage? How do you protect? And make available when necessary the information that's been captured. But the field itself is morphing. As you saw that illustration of information governance, our students at our school will look for credentials as certified records managers. And in fact, my book is used for preparation for that exam. But in addition, they will move in other directions. One of them is information governance professional. That's another exam by ARMA where the students use the same reference books. And then certified information governance officer, which brings in a lot more on security, privacy, data governance, and this book is again recommended for people studying for that exam. So what we're seeing is that our students are taking a more holistic view, and I don't only mean our students, our entire profession, and that we have to maybe really concentrate on one area that we love to work in, such as maybe preservation, but we also have to understand everything else. And as we see how we fit in that particular environment in which we're working, I've spoken to people in the healthcare, pharmaceutical environment, for example. How do you then position yourself in order to get promotions, in order to move up in that organization? And a lot of times it's by becoming an information governance professional yourself, or getting into the data governance field and being able to take charge there. So that leadership and management chapter that we've added helps prepare students to be able to advocate for themselves, if you will, within the organization in the field so that they can move into promising areas. So not always sticking right where you start, but keep moving.
Pat, thanks. We get another specific question for you. My school district just had a breach with everything, including social security numbers being compromised. It seems despite our best efforts, nothing is really working in terms of security.
Yeah.
If you have some thoughts on that, and then while you're answering, if the other presenters can think about big challenges that are facing people in their professions and just one quick piece of advice they would give.
Yeah, well, and a data breach is a big deal, and it has to do with your information technology department, your information management. So it's not just the records management piece of it, but in any field, there are solutions. The solutions can be who has access to this. Are you setting your permissions? Are you setting your roles properly? I mean, that's something an administrator has to learn right away, right? And then are you keeping your software up to date? And are you making sure, for example, a lot of data breaches happen when somebody doesn't update their software. Microsoft it has been mentioned several times in instances like this. So you've got to make sure the patches are in place. But in records management itself, if you talk about the sensitivity of the information, you can make sure that you know where that information is located. I mentioned it could be anywhere. You need to know where your records are. And a lot of us use Amazon Web Services, and we've got different buckets for different SharePoint. And that's where some information is. And Amazon has a solution called Macy that can look at all the buckets and look for your social security numbers and alert you to the fact that you've got problems there. You can also identify those and, make sure that you redact that kind of information. So I would say in your circumstances, you've got to learn what's being used. You've got to learn how the permissions, the policies are in place, and are they being enforced? And then also what other kinds of technology is available that can help you resolve the issues that you're facing. So it's not a quick answer. It's your circumstances will dictate what you need to do answer.
Any other thoughts on that from the panel? If not, we can go into our last question before we close out, which is why do you think LIS students would really like your books? And maybe we'll start with Eric since he just smiled in response.
Yeah, I just love the idea of the LIS students just sort of looking through all of our books. But yeah, I mean, I would say the big ours is also, we didn't really talk a whole lot about the actual structure of our book, but it is very much a tour through how to operate spaces that are these creative technologies ones. And my feeling is LIS students especially should remember that, kind of the purpose of a space like ours. The way that I often talk about it when library folks come through my department for a tour is that, I just always remind them that, historically libraries are about preservation and access to information, right? But they've always had a role in communications, helping people spread the word of their research. And basically, as spaces like ours are fundamentally just taking that idea and moving it into this sort of world of democratized technology where no longer do people have to be specialists to know and have specialized access to equipment because it's much more ubiquitous, including production facilities that they carry around as their smartphones. And so kind of a responsible library is going to help people learn how to do that same communication that libraries have done for centuries, in this new context. And that because it's all much more available to people, it's sort of a good, like I say, responsible act to do. And so it's a good field to get into. And the one other comment that I would just say is one of the things that ties back to other things that folks have talked about that I always find totally fascinating is how many of us that do this sort of library technology, creative technology stuff had no training in this as a library, it didn't exist in library school. It was not a thing that we came up doing. It's sort of, you find out that we all have arts backgrounds and museum backgrounds and lots of different things like that. So it's a place that really can sustain lots of different kinds of perspectives, which I think is really helpful.
Great. Any thoughts from Aisha or the organized authors?
I would hope the aim and the goal, and of course, my own personal hope is people will read this book and be inspired to take those calculated risks and keep fighting, be advocates, do the outreach, and understand that outreach is everybody's job, no matter what your title or position is, but also with that, understand that leadership is not simply a title. Right? It is what we do in this profession. We lead for access, equity, and inclusion. We lead for community, and we lead for bettering society. So hopefully they get the message of advocacy and how critical, especially in today's climate, how critical representation and inclusion is in the profession, but in society as well.
And I would say you're probably getting your MLIS because you want to work in a library and or some other organization doing library related work, information related work. And our argument is that getting organized in a union is one of the best ways you can serve your community, make sure your workplace gets you and your coworkers everything that you need.
Any thoughts, Pat or Alex or Joshua?
Yeah, I do. I was going to say that not all library students really want to work within the library. I know at SJSU we try to look at other fields that they may also be interested in or prepared for. And so there is an archives and records management strand that goes along with it for electives if somebody is interested in doing that. And then my book was geared to people who maybe want even a degree in archives and records. So it's separate from the library field. It's not part of that same degree. But I think the book itself, the reason people would find it valuable is that it really explains from the beginning up to where we are now, from that stone tablet to, our deep fakes, that we can provide stability in this world. We get overly excited about the next new thing, and records and information management is not exempt from its challenges, but we've learned over the centuries, and that's what I think this book gets to, is that it's important to document the actions and decisions made within the organizations, and we need to do it with creativity and flexibility in this dynamically evolving environment.
I think a library student would be interested in our book for a few reasons. One is it's not as lengthy, thick, and heavy as a typical book, which you can't carry around with you and use as a kind of manual as you go throughout your day. This one is really like a kind of language phrase book. When you're in a foreign country, you can carry it with you. You can, when you enter into a new job, I know I struggled with what exactly I should be doing as a liaison when I started my job after being in science for such a long time. This can really tell you what you should be doing from the very beginning, who you should reach out to, what those people are concerned with, how you should reach out to them in a meaningful way, what skills you should have when you go talk to them. And wherever you are, whatever stage you're at, whatever you're struggling with being a STEM librarian and engaging with that community, you can easily open it up and find it in that book and at least have somewhere to begin.
Right. And I think that's something that's great about so many of the editions textbooks is they're useful in school and then they become practical guides you can use for years after with just a lot of evergreen content in your work, even going into upper phases of it. So that said, I want to thank all of you for joining us today for this academic library workers in LIS program. The recording should be available on our YouTube page later this evening or tomorrow. And again, if you want to participate in other ALA Editions virtual events as an audience member, visit alaeditions.org/events, and we have a couple more listed there that haven't happened yet now. Again, thanks all, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.